And finally this week, the huge shift in influence of digital advertising and its relevance to brands and consumers. The conventional wisdom is if you're not using the space, then your brand isn't on track for a gold medal, so to speak. It was gratifying, therefore, to see one of the pioneering digital agencies, Gloo, winning the FinWeek Ad Review Agency of the Year. Executive Creative Director Pete Case joined us a little earlier.
I think finally we're seeing cut through in terms of brands actually using digital and gaining influence via digital channels. And so the increased relevance of our skills in the boardroom, really, to steer a communication or a marketing discussion.
Well, what's the history of Gloo? I mean, you've been around a while, but one senses that maybe you kind of saw all of this ahead of everybody else. And you can take credit for that.
I wish we could,
yeah.
But unfortunately not. No, some of it's being in the right place at the right time. I think having clients that also believe in us. Gloo has really been around for 7 years. First actually started out of the Omnicom stable with BBDO, and now independently owned with Coheso. And we work with a multitude of agencies. We have a collaborative kind of approach to work. And that's really centered around not suggesting at all that digital is the only medium or thought space to own, but a collaborative one, an integrated one. The rebalance in that shift between traditional mediums and digital mediums, which has taken a massive shift over the last year or two.
But the power balance, Pete, has shifted, though. I mean, you talk about traditional agencies not necessarily, or digital agencies not owning all the space or all the share of voice. But the reality is, in time, though, it will.
Well, I think you need to ask yourself, what is digital? So almost everything is digital. We worked on interactive television in the States 10 years ago. So it's only a matter of time before all of these touch points are digitally enabled. Our background comes from understanding these different mediums and technology and combining them with marketing and communications skills to actually just talk beyond campaigns. And I think that's where some of the insight comes from brands now. They can see the relevance of what we're talking about. All of our clients are looking to see where they can reduce budgets or at least understand where their budget's going. So digital inherently as a measurable arena allows them to do that.
Does digital necessarily mean a cheaper marketing solution?
Not at all. In fact, it's probably one of the best things to talk about, the myth that it can be done at the last moment. The reality is that everything has to be planned, and because of the technology, generally tested very carefully. So the lead times to market are sometimes 3 or 4 months. Some things in social channels can be very quick, but everything needs to be strategized and planned well in advance to be effective. The difference might be, though, in terms of ability to change a message during its process. So when things go live, unlike a TV commercial, we're sitting behind the scenes watching the audience's reaction, changing, crafting, getting into a two-way discussion, which is a very different arena.
I was going to say, you can't really do that with a billboard on a motorway, can you? Which is a little bit more difficult. Something you raised, which I find quite interesting. You've used the word technology 3 or 4 times.
Right.
Within the agency itself, marrying the technological expertise and the necessity that you have with the creative side.
Right.
It's kind of the geeks versus the creatives.
Right.
How do you bring them together? Can you do that?
Well, I think it's just a mutual respect. We have 2 different teams that work very closely together, and they both respect each other's craft. They certainly don't understand it to its fullest extent, but what they're looking for and what we're looking for is always a blend of both of those skills in terms of our output. So if it's a billboard that happens to be connected to digital technology, it needs both of those headspaces in a room to make sure that we can actually do it and make it work.
Is a digital creative person different from a traditional creative person?
I think everyone's trained probably at the same colleges. It's around your background and how much you embrace technology. Again, the myth is that everybody in an agency like ours understands how to program, but we don't. We have specialists that do that. But you've got to be interested and excited about what technology can do. So as a business, we're as excited about the creative idea, but also about the delivery and measurement after it. Because, I mean, if you take a classic example of a magazine ad, the difference for us is that we'll take a magazine ad and allow the consumer to scan it, look at a 3D model maybe on their phone there and then on their couch, look at different colors, put it in an environment, then go straight to an online shop on their phone and purchase. And we're controlling the whole of that. And after that, we'll gain their details, we'll carry on a one-to-one marketing personalized message with them. So I think from the value chain, we're sort of needing to understand and be excited about the actual technical side as well.
You also raise an interesting point, the websites themselves or the digital solution. You also you raise the whole thing about being part of the value chain. This thing called the transactional gateway. I mean,
Right.
you're sitting right in the middle of that. As well as marketing, you're conducting business for the brand as well. I think people don't often see that.
Yeah, and I think, again, if someone was to say, what do we do? We offer marketing services, but we also offer business services. So a lot of what we do does turn into a transaction, and we may be controlling that transaction, measuring that transaction, or actually creating that transaction ourselves, whether it's an engine we've built or somebody else's. But it's all about integration. It's never about really one single point of contact or touch point with the consumer. It's usually taking them on a journey from one point to another, and then continuing that.
Let's pick up something. It was a viral video called Haka Eyes. This was at the
It was at the
Rugby World Cup.
Rugby
World Cup.
Yeah. And what we decided to do was create a number of viral videos online that were essentially a bunch of male supporters giving advice around New Zealand and watching the game. And just one of these videos was Haka Eyes, where we invented these sort of printed eyes that allowed you to protect yourself from the haka when it went on. The nice thing for us was that it extended out into the stadium, so it was printed and actually distributed in the stadiums. And it was a good example of integrated, where it's not just standalone digital, but it touches into print and then in event.
You also talk about being part of the business solution. You've done some very interesting work for the big banking brand FNB.
FNB, yeah. I think as a brand, they've really embraced the kind of what we do, and also internally, you know, with their banking apps and everything else. Right now, we're just helping launch or enable their self-service branches. They're called .fnb, and essentially it's all built around this how can we help you methodology, which is how do we get you as a modern consumer into the bank with a fast turnaround where you spend less time in the bank and more time on your lifestyle. And it's activated by touchscreens, so it's a full-service, self-service environment. And it's very exciting.
You've also got to make it easy for people, though, because I would also suggest with something like this, and I've seen it, there's a fear factor.
Huge fear factor, which is why it's a slow process and it's a learning process. You know, we're deliberately working with consumers to see what they feel about the technology and adapting it. And that, again, is the great thing about digital. Once it goes live, it's just the beginning of that journey. So we're in phase 1 now. There's 3 or 4 in the pipeline as to how we're going to enhance the experience.
And finally, let's touch on SA tourism.
Right. A great example of where we really took a printed brochure and turned it into a touchscreen environment. So at trade expos around the world, South Africa and all of its activities are demonstrated and put out there for tourism trade to purchase. Traditionally, it's a brochure. We created a very large touchscreen which trade buyers could come and interact with. And when I say interact, they could watch video, they could search through different genres, and then they could select the ones they're interested in, press a button, it pings back to their phone or to their office computer and just gives them a relevant list of the information they're looking for. Obviously, it lowers the carbon footprint, but what it does is it communicates to the individual that they just get what they want and walk away with it. And of course, it's up to date the whole time. It's traveling around the world at the moment. We can measure it and track it and update it.
The views there of Pete Case from the agency Gloo. Next week on the programme, we'll go behind the remake of the Ford brand worldwide. I'm Jeremy Maggs. Thank you for joining us.